And before we talk about Hamlet, just a couple of other background things. In 1596, Shakespeare's son, Hamlet, dies. He's 11 years old. Okay? For much of the early and mid-1590s, Shakespeare is writing predominantly, not entirely, but predominantly, comedies and history plays. The history plays are plays dealing with English history. Okay? Largely what are called the Wars of the Roses, and slightly before that. Okay? 13th, 14th century history for the most part. Some 15th century also. Okay? But then his son dies in 1596. And beginning in the late 1590s, 1599, he starts to emphasize more tragedies. He's written some tragedies before. He's written the tragedy of Richard III, which is also one of the history plays, but it's called a tragedy. But beginning of 1599, he starts to write major tragedies. And the period from about 1599 to 1605, 1606, he writes about a half dozen really major tragedies. So 1599, you've got the tragedy of Julius Caesar. 1600, you've got Hamlet. And in the next 3 or 4 years, you get Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, and there's another one that I'm drawing a blank on. So for some reason, late 1590s, Shakespeare kind of turns from this comedic view of life, if you want, that is, where bad things happen, but ultimately good comes out on top and society is repaired, to kind of more tragic vision of life where life sucks and then you die. I mean, one of the ideas a lot of people see in Hamlet is the futility of life, that life is meaningless. Or in King Lear, life is just pain, and it doesn't mean anything, and then you die. Okay? I don't think that's true. We'll look at that a little bit when we get to Hamlet. Now, when he writes Hamlet, he's writing within a genre of tragedy called revenge tragedy. Okay? This goes back to the 1st century of Rome. Seneca is mentioned in your introduction, who kind of starts this genre. And the genre has several characteristics or defining traits, if you want, or conventions is the kind of the literary word used to describe these. It begins with, usually, revenge tragedy usually begins with either someone already dead when the play begins, or somebody killed very, very quickly, like in the opening scene at the very least. Okay? So somebody's killed, or somebody's already dead when the play begins, and that person's ghost comes back and demands vengeance. Okay? Usually the person's ghost comes back and demands a family member to exact that vengeance. So if the ghost is the ghost of a dead king, who's the ghost? What family member is the ghost going to ask to get the vengeance? Son. If he has a son, it'll be the son. Why? Because even in Roman fashion, this is very true in Germanic fashion, that son should be the one who becomes the next king. That is, you kill a king, and that king's son, if he has a son, should be the next king. In Germanic fashion, that's always the case. Okay? If that king has several sons, the eldest son becomes king. Now, sometimes what happens in Germanic fashion, and we see this in the English history plays, is the eldest son becomes king, but let's say son number 4 wants to be king. So what does son number 4 have to do? Kill 1 through 3. Kill his elder brothers. Okay? Maybe. What happens is son number 1, the eldest son, has sons of his own. So they jump in line ahead of son number 4. So let's say you have a king, who has 4 sons. 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's say son number 1 has 2 sons. Number 4 wants to be king. He bumps off number 1. Okay? What else must he then do? It's not enough to take these 2 out because they're not the ones immediately in line at that point. When he dies, this one becomes next in line. If he dies, this one becomes next in line. So if number 4 wants to be king, he's got to do that. And if these 2 have sons, he's got to take them all out before he's in line to be the king. All right? You can see how this can end up in a bloody mess. And that's generally what happens in revenge tragedies. So the ghost comes back. The ghost tells somebody, you got to kill person X. Okay? So murder is involved, and usually lots of deaths. If you look at the dramatis personae on pages 1603 and the very top of 1604, 7 of those people end up dead by the end of the play. And 4 of them end up dead in the very last scene of the play, on the stage. Okay? Now, another element that is usually included in revenge tragedies is this element of madness. Why? Just take a wild guess. Why would madness enter this kind of atmosphere? Okay, imagine your situation, our world right now. And we're all here, and we're all awake. Everybody's eyes are open, I see. Maybe you're not mentally awake, but you're physically here. And say for a moment, not through the door, but right here in the middle of the floor, a ghost appears. A literal ghost, a real ghost. We all see it. It's not a figment of our imaginations. What's our reaction? What's a possible reaction? Am I seeing things? Am I going crazy? Yeah, that's a possible reaction. So, madness. But let's say then the ghost doesn't appear to everybody, it only appears to Alan. Alan starts talking to this thing right here. He's not talking here. He's not talking here. He's not talking here. What do we all assume? He lost his marbles. Okay? So there's that element. Now, a big question to ask concerning Hamlet is, Hamlet is going to say, relatively early in the play, in the first act, he's going to say to his friends, after he sees the ghost, from this point on, if I look mad, if I act crazy, don't give out to anybody that I'm acting crazy. Big question is he merely acting? Or does Hamlet really go crazy? People have asked that question almost since the first day the play was performed. Is Hamlet crazy? Because he sees things other people don't see. Well, yeah, for the most part. Okay. Look at the play. Look at the dramatis personae, which is kind of interesting how it's presented. You have Claudius, King of Denmark, Hamlet, son to the late, and nephew to the present king. Okay. One other comment. Thomas Kidd, another English playwright, wrote Spanish Tragedy in 1587. He's the one who kind of brings the revenge tragedy genre to England. Okay? Shakespeare isn't the first person to use this. Kidd does. And he writes it very, very much more according to the ancient Roman classical style, follows all the rules. Shakespeare doesn't. Shakespeare's a rule breaker. He doesn't like rules. He breaks them all, okay? Which we'll talk about maybe a little bit later. So, let me back up for a moment. Hamlet Sr., a.k.a. Ghost, Okay? His son is Hamlet Jr. His brother is Claudius. Okay? And then over here, so this is Denmark. Over here, we have Norway. And we have Fortinbras Sr. and Fortinbras Jr. Okay? Now, every now and then, the king is going to be referred to simply as Denmark or Norway. Okay? The King of England will be referred to as England. Like today, if the government says something, does something, if Trump issues some kind of policy or foreign policy or something like that, news accounts will say, Washington, D.C. said. Well, Washington doesn't literally speak. That's a figure of speech, okay? So this is kind of a figure of speech. So your dramatis personae says Claudius, King of England. So he's king. Hamlet Sr. was King of England. Excuse me, was King of Denmark, but he's now dead. Okay? Claudius is King of Denmark. Hamlet Sr. was King of Denmark. Remember what we were just talking about 5 minutes ago. He's dead, so who should be king? What's the problem? He's not king. Who is? His Uncle Scar. This is Lion King, by the way. It's the basic plot of Lion King. You have Mufasa, you have Scar, and you have Simba. And the rest of the plot pretty much, follows it. Simba, Hamlet Jr., even has a couple of friends in Lion King, right? Pumbaa and Timon, or whatever their names are, okay? Change the characters a little bit, because those are good friends, and Hamlet, they're not good friends, okay? So, Claudius, Hamlet, son to the late, nephew to the present king. Now, that doesn't tell us everything, however. He's not only nephew to the present king, we're going to find out in the first act, Act 1, Scene 2, he's also stepson to the present king. Okay, so nephew and stepson. Nephew and stepson means the present king has done what? Married his mother, who was his dead brother's wife. Okay? And then we have a bunch of other people mentioned that we won't pay any attention to at this point. So, play opens with a question. Who's there? Why does it open with a question? I'll leave that up for right now. What is the question? What are some of the things the question is implying? What do I mean? Or inferring. Think of the person asking who's there. What is that person doing? Keeping watch. So if you're out there keeping watch, you're looking, right? You're observing. You're keeping an eye on things. Who's there? He hears something. He sees something. So he asks, who's there? Themes of the play. Okay? Or, I can call them themes. Observing, watching, looking. Each one of those is neutral. Observing, watching, looking. Take one of those verbs and put a negative spin on it. I don't mean add an adjective to it. I mean, take a verb that means looking, watching, observing, but in kind of a negative light. Stalking, okay. What's the difference between stalking and this? Stalking implies not only looking, but movement. Following. Okay? But close. What does a stalker usually do usually he, before he starts following.
Watches.
But give me a negative idea of that, a negative version of that. Spying. Spying. Is spying ever positive? Really? I mean, think about it. No. It's what? It's clandestine. You're trying to hide. No, I'm not watching you. Because you're a creeper, you know. So, this idea of watching or of spying, we're going to be told by the character Ophelia in the middle of the play about Hamlet. She's going to call Hamlet the observed of all observers. Okay? So what she's saying there is everybody in Denmark does this. Okay? What's it mean? They watch. They look at everybody else. They look over the fences. They look in the windows. They try to get a glimpse of what's on the computer screen, the whole 9 yards. Okay? But the person who is the most watched of all of those watchers is Hamlet. Notice, the observed of all observers also implies Hamlet's a watcher too. Hamlet's an observer also. But he's the one in the fishbowl that everybody watches all the time. Why? What is he? He's a prince. Just sheer guess. Why do you think is one of the reasons why Prince Harry and his wife Meghan moved from England to Canada? To get out of the public eye. To not be the observed of all observers. Whereas Harry's brother, William, is dutifully doing what? He's getting ready to be the next king after his father. He's being bred, he's being raised, he's being, molded, essentially. So that when his grandma finally kicks the bucket and his dad becomes king and he finally kicks the bucket or, pushes him along, he'll be the next king. Okay? So, observing, spying. Who's there? Notice we're told they're on a platform at Elsinore. Okay? Elsinore is a port city of Denmark, and it's got a big castle. It's a real place. Okay? So, Francisco, nay, answer me, stand and unfold yourself. Long live the king. Bernardo? So, who's there? And the other person replies, who are you? Okay? Stand, unfold. That is, make yourself hidden. Because I think the implication is, if you think of a battlement, a castle, has these what are called crenellated walls. I kind of imagine when Francisco calls it, he steps behind here. And Bernardo's like, I don't see you. So, long live the king. It's kind of like code. It doesn't mean down with Trump. It means may Claudius reign forever. Bernardo? Yep, me. Okay. So they talk. They greet each other. We find out what time it is. 'Tis now struck 12. It's midnight. Okay. Bernardo asks, have you had quiet guard? Not a mouse stirring. Okay. So Horatio and Marcellus come in. And Marcellus, Bernardo, and Francisco tried to convince Horatio of what? They saw something. Okay. Marcellus asks, line 21, has this thing appeared again tonight? I haven't seen anything, said Bernardo. Marcellus, Horatio says, 'tis but our fantasy. Go back to what Theseus said at the beginning of Act 5. What does the imagination do? It gave shape to airy nothing and bodily habitation. In other words, at night, standing watch on a seaside, where you often have fog form, you might see something out in that fog. And it might just be fog, billowing, swirling, moving fog. He says it's but our fantasy. It's our imagination playing tricks with us, and will not let belief take hold of him, touching this dreaded sight. Again, go back for a moment to A Midsummer Night's Dream. How does Hippolyta counter Theseus' big long speech about lovers, madmen, and poets? Yeah, but the lovers all saw exactly the same thing. They couldn't all have the same shaping fantasy, she says. Okay? So, Marcellus says, that's why I told Horatio to come with us tonight. Maybe it'll show up again. When has it shown up? The last 2 nights. When? Just after midnight. Okay? Horatio will not appear. Why does he say it will not appear? Think of what we talked about the other day. Substance versus appearance. He says it won't appear. Why? Because there's no substance behind it. It's not real. Another major theme, appearance versus reality. Because every one of us, I think it's fair to say, every one of us has been tricked by our eyes. We've seen something and we thought maybe we've seen something because it has appeared one way, but the reality has been a little bit different. Okay? Will not appear. So they say, well, let's sit down. Let us tell you again what it is we saw the last 2 nights. Okay? So, Bernardo says, last night, well, when that same star that's westward from the pole was, just about where it is now, and the ghost enters. He said, look. And Marcellus says, excuse me, back up, line 41. In the same figure, like the king that's dead. Like the king. What kind of figure of speech is that? It's a simile. It uses like or as. What does that mean? It's not the king. It's the appearance, but it's not the king. If it's like something, it's not something. It's not the thing itself. Okay? Marcellus then says, thou art a scholar. Speak to it, Horatio. What do you mean, thou art a scholar? Your gloss tells you, exorcisms were performed in Latin, which Horatio, as an educated man, would be able to speak. Maybe. That's not really what it means. It means you are a university student. We're going to be told that later on. When Hamlet's going to see Horatio, he's going to say, what are you here for? Why aren't you back at Wittenberg, the university Hamlet and Horatio both attend? Why are you still here? Well, your father, your mother, and your uncle got married. He goes, actually he says, your father was buried. He says, no, you came to watch my mother marry my father's brother. He goes, oh, yeah, that happened quickly. And I decided to stick around and, comfort you, etc. Okay? So thou art a scholar. You're a student. Now, that did mean he would be learning and would know Latin fairly well. Okay? Bernardo then says again, this time a question though. Looks not like the king? Doesn't he look just like the king? Not this king, the king that's dead. Look at Horatio's response. Most like. Okay? most like. Later on, well, hold on. It harrows me with fear and wonder. Your gloss, harrows, lacerates the feelings. What an idiotic statement. It's not what harrows means. Harrows means like removes me out of myself. Modern English scares the hell out of me. Okay? Scares me to death to see this. So, Horatio addresses him. What art thou that usurps this time of night, together with that fair and warlike form, in which the majesty of buried Denmark did sometimes march? By heaven I charge thee. In other words, by God, speak. Notice what he says, though. What are you that usurps this time of night? Remember Puck's speech towards the very end, not the final epilogue, but his speech just before that in Midsummer Night's Dream, where he says, now it's the time of night when the graves open up and the dead walk in the churchway. Okay? It's part of Elizabethan popular belief, popular mythology, if you want. So he says, you are usurping the time of night. What does it mean to usurp? To wrongfully take control of. In other words, you should still be in the grave. You don't belong up here. This is where we, the living, live. Okay? Together with that fair and warlike form in which the majesty of buried Denmark did sometimes march. He doesn't say you look like that fair and warlike form. He says you are. Okay? And Marcellus tells us this is Shakespeare giving a stage direction in speech. It is offended. So what do we assume the ghost does? He turns and walks away. Like, oh, how dare you address me that way? And he turns. Okay? So, Bernardo says, is not this something more than fantasy? In other words, okay, Horatio, you saw it. Did we make this up? What think you? Before my God, I might not disbelieve without the sensible and true avouch of mine own eyes. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't have seen it. But now that I've seen it, I believe it. And notice he says, before my God, that is, I swear to God, I believe this thing is real. This is true. Okay, that's an oath. Elizabethan days, pretty serious to utter an oath like that. And the time frame in which the play is set, which is several hundred years earlier, it's in Christian Denmark, it's even, you don't say before my God, unless, you're willing to die for that, okay? So, Marcellus then says again, is it not like the king? Notice this is the third time. Look at Horatio's response. As thou art to thyself. Marcellus, is it not like the king? Not the king himself. Why? Because we all know he's dead and buried. And Horatio's response takes that and says, as thou art to thyself. Well, how are you like to yourself? You're not like yourself, right? You are yourself. So, as you, Marcellus, are like to yourself, that is, you are yourself, so this is like to the dead king. This isn't an appearance of the dead king. This is the king himself, walking among the living. Bad news. Okay? So, he says, and he's dressed how? How he was when he last fought against Norway. See, Hamlet Sr., come over here, fought against King of Norway and killed him. So what automatically needs to happen, let's say, according to a revenge tragedy? Or we can even take the revenge tragedy out for a moment and just think of a good honor culture system, honor-based culture system. You kill my father, think Princess Bride if you're familiar with it. You killed my father. Prepare to die. I'm going to kill you. Fortinbras Jr., current king of Norway, now wants what? Revenge. He can't get revenge against him because he's dead. So who's he going to get revenge against? Hamlet? Hamlet's not the current king. No, he's going to get revenge against Claudius. How so? He's going to march to war against him. And that's what they talk about. So, Horatio says, the dead king is armed cap a pee, cap, head, a pee, pod, P-O-D, to toe. Armed head to toe. Why? Because this is a warning. War is about to break out. Okay? And that's why Marcellus says, page 1606, beginning in line 70 and following, why are we keeping watch? What's the purpose? Because he thinks we're at peace. Okay? And Horatio gives a long speech, talks about Hamlet Sr. killing Norway, and therefore young Norway, to prove his stuff, to prove his guts, is getting ready to fight us. So we have to keep watch. Notice, they're probably keeping watch looking out to the sea. Why? Because that's how Norway's going to come. Norway and Denmark are not connected. Okay? Denmark kind of juts out like this. Germany's down here. Norway's over here. Sweden's over here. So they got to come across the ocean. Okay? So, big long speech that Horatio gives. And Bernardo says, I think you're right. Line 107 or so. Well may it sort that this portentous figure comes armed through our watch. Portentous. That means it is a portent. It is an image of something bad to come. Okay? Give you a political example. It doesn't matter what your politics are. Last week, according to Democrats, and according to Democrat strategists, last week was a portentous week for Democrats. They said, portends bad stuff's going to happen this year. How so? Monday night, Iowa caucuses, totally screwed up. They still don't really know who won. They're just saying, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Pete Buttigieg. And then Bernie Sanders and everybody else gets nothing. Okay? Tuesday night, Trump's State of the Union, which people in polls, left, right, Democrat, Republican, said, it's a pretty good speech. I like that. Day 3, Trump's acquitted in the impeachment. Day 4, now Thursday you can kind of leave aside. Day 5, they had a New Hampshire debate, which went everywhere. Okay? According to, I didn't watch it. I can't stand it. Okay? And they're like, we're screwed, man. Okay, all that portends bad stuff to come. Horatio then says, you're right. And in fact, let me give you some classical examples. And he refers to Julius Caesar. Okay. Hamlet dates from 1600. Julius Caesar was first performed, the tragedy of Julius Caesar, was first performed in 1599. Shakespeare's pretty smart. He's kind of referring back to his previous plays. Now, you guys have probably been told, I'll bet if you had 1010 and 1020 here, that a definition of plagiarism, or one of the, not definition, an example of plagiarism is to quote from yourself from a previous paper you might have written. The English department says that. Actually, MTSU says that. That's totally asinine. You can't plagiarize yourself. Literally. Plagiarism is always the borrowing of another person's ideas and such. Okay? You can lift stuff from previous papers you've written, and professors can say don't do that. Or you can try to submit whole papers that you've written for another class, for a class, and most professors will say, don't do that. I want you to come up with something new, etc. But that's not plagiarism. Okay? So, Shakespeare does this all the time. He plagiarizes himself. He brings in ideas, he brings in images, he brings in exact little phrases from previous things he wrote. So he talks about before Julius Caesar fell, that is, before he was killed, what happened? There were mighty portentous events. There was an eclipse. There were shooting stars. We're coming up in a month on the Ides of March, March 15th. And in the play, and supposedly historically this happened, which is why Shakespeare put it in the play, a soothsayer, a prophet, soothsayer merely means a truth teller, said, beware the Ides of March. I'll get the name right. Caesar's wife had dreams the night before, said, don't go out. And he's like, I'm not afraid of a silly woman's dreams. And he gets killed the next day. Men, listen to your wives if you have them. So, he says all this, and then notice, the ghost comes back in. Why? Think strategically. Think in terms of playwriting. Why would you have the ghost leave, and then they talk about all this stuff, and then the ghost comes back out? For the simple reason it gives them an opportunity to talk all about all this stuff. It gives the playwright a means to have characters discuss stuff he wants to put out into the audience's ears so that they understand some things. This is part of the background exposition. So then the ghost comes back out. And they try to address him again. Okay? Notice now, when Horatio addresses him, he doesn't say, by heaven I charge thee. Jesus says, it's not a command. What does he do instead? He entreats him. He beseeches him. He requests from him, the ghost. Line 128. If thou hast any sound or use of voice, speak to me. If there be any any good thing to be done, that may to thee do ease and grace to me, speak to me. In other words, if I can do something to help you and also help me, speak. If thou art privy to thy country's fate, if you know what's going to happen to us, if you can tell the future, which happily foreknowing your country, that is, if we foreknow what's going to happen, it can change it, is the implication. Speak. Or if thou hast uphoarded in thy life extorted treasure in the womb of earth, for which they say you spirits oft walk in death, speak of it. Now that's a popular cultural, mythological idea that the dead sometimes walk the earth. Why? Because they buried treasure and then they died. And they're condemned to walk the earth until they can speak to someone about the buried treasure so that the treasure can do good in this life. Because what good does it do for the dead person? Not any. So, notice his three things. If you can say something that I can do good for you and that will be good for me, speak. If you know what's going to happen to your country, and by forewarning us we can change what's going to happen, speak. If you've got buried treasure that's not doing you any good, that can do good to others, if you tell me of it, speak. Okay? And the cock crows, and the ghost leaves. Why? Because Horatio says, I have heard that the cock, that is a trumpet to the morn, doth with his lofty, shrill-sounding throat awake the god of day. Well, they've already said the ghost has done what? Usurped this time of night. It's taken control. So if the cock is indicating the sun is about to come up, the time of night is gone. The ghost, again, popular belief, has to go back to its prison where it stays during the day. And the next evening, it will come out again. Okay? So they talk about Christmas. They talk about the birth of the Savior, etc., etc. And Horatio says, we got to tell Hamlet. We got to tell Hamlet. You know, it's got to mean something. Right? Act 1, Scene 1 ends. So what does Act 1, Scene 1 show us? What are we introduced to there? The conflict. How so? Is it all spelled out? No. But the very fact that we have a ghost walking on earth, not good. Why? How often does that happen? Not every day. So we get Scene 2. And notice, it's a room of state in the castle. That means it's richly furnished and decorated. And we get a flourish. A bunch of guys with trumpets come out and go, you know, to announce the king. And the king comes in, Claudius, king of Denmark, and king of Gertrude. Gertrude the king, counselors, Polonius his son Laertes, Hamlet cum aliis, that is, with others. Whole bunch of people. Okay? Come out. And Claudius gets a big, long speech. Notice, it's not a soliloquy. He's not telling us what he really thinks in a heart of hearts. He's delivering a big, pompous speech. Okay? And notice what he says. Though yet of Hamlet, our dear brother's death, the memory be green. He's not been dead very long. How long has he been dead? At one point, Hamlet will say, nay, not twice 2 weeks, a month. And at another point, we're told it's been over 2 months. Okay? And that it us befitted to bear our hearts in grief and our whole kingdom to be contracted in one brow of woe. That is, it's not been long since Hamlet Sr. died, and it was right and appropriate for the whole kingdom to be mourning his death. You know, what happens every time we have a president die? Even though the president's been out of office for years. Like when, I don't know, just a year or so ago, George H.W. Bush died. And there was, a national thing in Washington, etc. And before that, Reagan died. Okay? Jimmy Carter's the longest living ex-president we've had. Okay? And Carter will probably die in the next few years. And, there will be another national thing. The last time we've had really a national mourning for a president was when JFK was assassinated. Why? Because he was young, relatively speaking. He was young. He was cut down in his quote-unquote prime of life. Nobody, expected that. But that's the idea he's getting at. So, yet to be contracted in one brow of woe, yet so far hath discretion fought with nature. Discretion, wisdom, thinking, rationality, fought with nature that we with wisest sorrow think on him. That is, it's natural to mourn, but he says, we also, thinking of my dead brother, we also kind of took this situation in mind and thought about it, that we with the wisest sorrow think on him together with remembrance of ourselves. It's really sad that Hamlet died. But, we've also got to think of what? Going on with life. Right? If you merely give up when somebody that is dear to you dies, you can't go on. But he says we have to go on. So what does he mean by together with remembrance of ourselves? Well, look at the next sentence. Therefore, our sometime sister, now our queen. Now our queen implies what? She's now no longer just sister-in-law. I've married her. Why? Well, her husband was dead, and she's kind of hot. So what quote-unquote moral law has been broken by marrying his sister-in-law. Remember, this is a Christian society. It's very clear it's a Christian society. That's incest, according to traditional Christian morality. Your brother dies, you don't marry your brother's sister. Okay? That just, the relation is too close. Even though it's not a blood relation there. Okay? Well, we hope. So, he says, we, as 'twere with a defeated joy, with an auspicious and a dropping eye, auspicious, looking towards the future, dropping, that is tears dropping, looking at the past, with mirth in funeral and with dirge in marriage in equal scale, weighing delight and dole. Dearth in marriage, sadness in marriage, and mirth in funeral, we tried to bring good out of sadness. Therefore, he says, we have taken her to wife, nor have we herein barred your better wisdoms, which have freely gone with this affair long. Why does he throw in that last line and a half? Nor have we therein barred your better wisdoms, which have gone along with this affair. What's he trying to say to his advisors and counselors? I think, in this class, I talked about when Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway. What has to be done in the traditional English custom, Shakespeare's day, the 3 Sundays before? The banns are read in church. Will and Anne are going to be married in 3 weeks. Anybody know any reason why they shouldn't? In other words, do any of you have any dirt on Will? Do any of you have any dirt on Anne? No? Okay, we're going to do this again next week. And it's done the next week, and it's done the following week, and then the marriage is done the following week. Okay? In other words, everybody agrees to it. This is fine. Everybody here agrees to this marriage. This is his way of helping to distribute any blame. None of you said anything to stop us. None of you said, Claudius, that's incest. That's a mortal sin, okay? Thanks. For all, thanks, okay? So, then he addresses his counselors and ambassadors and says, I know young Fortinbras is all hot and heavy and he's getting ready. So, we're going to send ambassadors and such, okay? Then he addresses Laertes, bottom of 1609. Laertes is the son of his closest advisor, his chief counselor, right? And what's he saying to Laertes? So you want to go back to school? That is, you want to go back to Paris? He says, yes. Your father's okay with that? Yes. Then you can go, okay? So he tells Laertes he can go. Polonius says, yep, that's fine. So, Claudius then, line 64, turns his attention to Hamlet and says, but now my cousin Hamlet and my son. Why does he call him cousin and son? Cousin just means what? Family. How close? Family. It doesn't have to be immediate family, like brother, sister. It doesn't have to literally be cousin. It just means extended relation. How is Hamlet Claudius's cousin? What's his extended relationship? He's his nephew. Hamlet is Claudius's nephew. Okay? Hamlet Sr. was Claudius's brother. Hamlet Jr. is Hamlet Sr.'s son. So there's uncle to nephew relationship. That's the cousin part. And my son. That's the problem. Again, the incest idea. You shouldn't be nephew and son. It's just wrong, okay, in traditional, Christian tradition. So, now my cousin Hamlet and my son. In Hamlet, we're told in the little bracket word, delivers an aside. An aside is a speech to the audience that nobody on the stage supposedly hears. It's not a soliloquy, because in a soliloquy, the speaker is alone on the stage. Hamlet obviously isn't alone on the stage. Nearly everybody that was there is still there. The only ones that have left are Voltimand and Cornelius and Laertes. Okay? So Hamlet says, a little more than kin and less than kind. What does Hamlet mean, a little more than kin? See, Hamlet takes the meaning of Claudius's cousin, and he just uses another word for it. Kin. We're of the same family. Now that might mean second cousin 3 times removed, but still kin. Okay? So a little more than kin, that is, we're closer than just kin. And less than kind. What's he mean by kind? Does he mean kind like in the modern English meaning? To be kind, to be nice? What kind of thing is this? Anybody? What kind of thing? It's a phone. More specific, it's an iPhone. What kind of thing is this? Bottle, thank you. This isn't rocket science, okay? What kind of thing is this? It's a marker, right? So, we've just said what about each of these 3 things? What their nature essentially is. Now, we can go back to the substance idea and go, okay, it's petroleum, it's, petroleum, and it's petroleum. So if you want to divest yourself of fossil fuels, get rid of all of it. Less than kind. We've talked about what these things are. So what does Hamlet mean, and less than kind? Kind means something's nature, what it is. So if Claudius Sr. is less than kind, how can you be less than, let's give it its adjectival form, natural? How can you be less than natural? Unnatural. That's what he means. Claudius is more than kin. We're not just cousins. Uncle, nephew in Germanic society, which Hamlet's is, the uncle-nephew relationship is the closest relationship there is. It's closer than father-son. In fact, it's even more specific than that. It doesn't apply to Hamlet here. It's say for the sake of argument, Hamlet Sr. had a sister, and her name was Inga. Okay? Take that back. Let me use Claudius. Say Claudius had a sister also, would also be Hamlet Sr.'s sister, and her name was Inga. Okay? She has a son named Rolf. This relationship, okay, would be the closest, strongest, most powerful relationship that could exist in typical ancient Germanic society. Sister's son. Even closer than brother's son. And the reason is because this son would usually be what's called fostered by this individual. That is, he would be born, he'd be raised for a few years, and around age 5, 6, 7, would go off to live with his uncle. and the uncle would teach him how to be a man. We don't know why. We have no idea why this relationship became that important. Okay? So when Hamlet says, more than kin, you're my uncle, and less than kind. What's the less than kind? Because kin replies to cousin. Less than kind replies to son. I shouldn't be your stepson. That's just totally wrong. And we're going to see later on in the play, a lot of people say, oh, Hamlet, man, he's got all kinds of Freudian sex hang-ups. He wants to be the one having sex with his mother. Because Hamlet's going to tell to his mother, do not go to that enseamed bed. Enseamed. A lot of people take that to mean enseamed. It's stained with semen, going with a black light, kind of a thing. That's possibly what it means. But what Hamlet is saying there is, mother, get out of his bed. Okay, we'll talk about that when we get to it. So, the king asks him, how is it that the clouds hang on you? You ever seen any of the old Disney Winnie the Pooh cartoons? There's a character, Eeyore, who walks around and always what's over Eeyore? Rain clouds. Okay? Why is it that the clouds still hang on you? Why do you seem like you're always in the dark, always depressed? Not so, my lord. I am too much in the sun. In the sun refers to, I am too much in your presence. Louis XIV, a king that Shakespeare would have been familiar with in reading, if nothing else, called himself the Sun King. Why? Because kings thought they ruled by what was called divine right. God put us here so that we are God to you little peons. You obey us like you would obey God. Hamlet says, no, I'm not under the clouds. I'm too much in the sun. If only I could get away from here. Because the king is the center around which all of society revolved. Okay? The queen. Good Hamlet, cast thy nighted color off. Nighted color. What color does Hamlet wear? Color of night. Black. So Hamlet's dressed all in black throughout the play. Okay? Why? What color do you wear to a funeral? White? Flowery? Yellow? No, you wear black. It's the color of mourning, color of sorrow. Okay? In traditional mourning services and such. Cast thy nighted color off, and let thine eye look like a friend on Denmark. Now, on Denmark there has two meanings. It means the land of Denmark, and it means Claudius. Look like a friend on your father. Do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust. What does that mean? How does she say Hamlet always walks around? Head down here. Veiled lids. Why? Because if one of you comes up to look at me, you can't see my eyes. You can see my eyelids. She says, and looking for your father in the dust, because he always keeps his face to the ground. Okay? Thou know'st 'tis common. What is common? The next clause. All that lives must die. Yeah, but who died recently? His dad. Keep going. Keep going. Her husband. Her husband. And what she said, it's okay. Everybody dies. Problem there? Passing through nature to eternity. It's okay, Hamlet. Daddy's gone on to be with Jesus. How long's Daddy been dead? Anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months. Either way, is this how a wife should respond to the death of her husband? Okay, maybe if he's an axe murderer or beat her all the time, you could understand that. We're not given any indication of that. The indication we get given later on in the play is that Hamlet Sr. doted on her. He gave her everything she wanted, and he was everything she wanted. So, Hamlet says, "Aye, madam, it is common." You're right. Everything that lives dies. Life's a bitch, and then you die. Kind of what Hamlet's implying there. So she says, "If it be, that is, if death is common, why seems it so particular with thee?" Why does death seem so particular, so powerful with you? She's saying, "Come on, Hamlet, suck it up. You're the only one mourning anymore." And Hamlet just, seems? Seems? What kind of verb is seems? It's what's called a subjunctive verb. Okay? Why? Because it indicates a condition contrary to fact. I don't care what you think of her, whatever. Just using this as an example because it works. Kim Kardashian seems like a virgin. No. How do I know? Because I could pull the screen down and I can show you. Not the case. Or, Donald Trump seems like a very humble person. No, you can't put that name and those words together. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. Okay? Maybe when he was 5, but not since then. It's a condition contrary to fact. Hamlet. Seems? Seems? Nay, it is. That is, it is particular to me. Why is it particular to him? Skipping everything he says in the next little speech. How particular is the one who died to him? He was my father. That's pretty particular. 'Tis not, I know not seem. What appear? No. 'Tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother. He's being sarcastic there. Nor customary suits of solemn black. That is, black cloak and black clothing underneath. Nor windy suspiration of forced breath, sighing all the time. No, nor the fruitful river in the eye, the constant tears, nor the dejected behavior of the visage, his face always downcast, always looking sad. You've known people, and you can tell when something's really bothering them, because their face just tells you volumes. Together with all forms, moods, shapes of grief that can denote me truly. What's the difference between a denotation and a connotation? A denotation gives you the literal dictionary definition of a word. A connotation gives you all the meanings that word might suggest. So, literal denotation, it's a color, right? What's a connotation? Feeling a little blue today. Doesn't mean you're walking around and you turn into Papa Smurf. It means you're a little sad. So, Hamlet says, all these things cannot denote me truly. My clothing, my tears, my sighs, my sad-looking face, those don't get at the reality of what's inside. He says, these indeed seem, right? Because what can you do with your clothing? When you are in mourning, when you are sad, what can you do? You could put on bright, airy, spring-like colors and pretend you're not. He says, these seem, for they are actions that a man might play. And there's another theme. Play acting. Pretending. It's part of the appearances versus reality, if you want. They are actions that a man might play. But I have that within which passeth show. That is, I have inside me what can't be play acted. These are but the trappings and the suits of woe. The trappings, the outward adornments. So what has Hamlet really said in that little speech? Or maybe not what he's really said. What has he implied? What has he given a little indication of? What's going on inside Hamlet? Have you ever put a kettle on to make tea or something, boil water, and you've got the little thing down so that as the water heats up, what's it start to do when it boils? It whistles, right? Well, Hamlet's just before whistling. He's boiling inside. He's saying, all this other stuff, these are just the outside trappings. You don't want to set me off. The fuse is lit. Okay? And the king responds, "Oh, Hamlet, 'tis sweet and commendable in your nature to give these morning." That's nice, Hamlet. This is what you ought to do. But you must know, or your father lost a father. Right? Your grandfather's dead, Hamlet. That father your grandfather lost his. Your great-grandfather's dead. And the survivor bound in filial obligation for some term to do obsequious sorrow. That is, and when your great-grandfather died, your grandfather was bound by his sonly duty to mourn him for a time. And once that time's up, you go on with life. But to persevere in obstinate condolement is a course of impious stubbornness. Impious, that is, it goes against heaven. So, he's saying, you are going against God in your stubborn grief. What else? It's unmanly grief. You're acting like a woman. So, you're going against God, you're acting like a woman. This is a warrior society. It's a knightly society. You're not acting like a knight. What else is it? It shows a will most incorrect to heaven. That is, again, emphasizing you are disobeying God. A heart unfortified, you're weak. A mind impatient, you can't suffer problems. An understanding simple and unschooled, for what we know must be and is as common. That's why the most vulgar thing that sense, etc. Death happens. Suck it up and move on. That's what he's saying to Hamlet in this whole speech, which is why he then says, towards the end of it, I don't want you to go back to university. I want you to stay here for a while. Why? If something happens to me, Hamlet, you're next in line. I mean, if I die, you become the king. Now, leaving aside, because we only have like less than a minute left, what goes through Hamlet's mind immediately when the king says that? If you were Hamlet, what would go through your mind? Yeah. I should be king, you dirty, rotten SOB. You're in my seat. Okay? So the queen says, oh, Hamlet, listen to your father. And Hamlet says, I will. Okay? So we will pick up on whatever day it is, Thursday, with Act 1, Scene 2, line 129, where we get Hamlet's first soliloquy. And it's pretty important. Read through Act 3 and expect maybe a quiz over Acts 1 through 3.